Emma, remember that thing we saw on TV? Jack asked, his voice quiet and excited. Emma's face tensed. She remembered the strange, uncomfortable images. I don't know, Jack. It didn't feel right, she replied, her voice unsure. But Jack, feeling more and more curious, insisted. Come on, Emma, let's try it. It'll be like a fun adventure. Emma's heart raced. She didn't want to, but Jack kept pushing. Once upon a time, there were two siblings, Jack and Emma. They lived in a small town called Pinebrook, in a cozy house on Maple Street. Their parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, were always busy with work. Jack was 9 years old and Emma was 7. They spent a lot of time alone at home, and though they didn't enjoy it, they tried to make the best of it by playing games or drawing. But there was always the TV, calling them with its bright lights and loud music. One evening, while their parents were still at work, Jack was watching TV when something caught his attention. It was a show that seemed different from what they usually watched. There were flashing lights, fast music, and adults talking in a way that was unfamiliar to Jack. Curious, he called to Emma, who was in the other room. Emma, come here and look at this, Jack called. Emma ran into the living room, her eyes wide with curiosity. She sat beside Jack, both of them staring at the screen in awe. They didn't understand much of what was happening, but it seemed exciting. Why are they doing that? Emma asked innocently, confused by what she was seeing. I don't know, Jack replied, his voice full of wonder. Maybe it's something fun that grown-ups do. The images on the screen continued, leaving them more confused but also intrigued. They had no idea that what they were watching was something meant for adults, not children. It was the first time they had ever seen something like that. After a few days, the images they had seen on TV stayed in their minds. Jack found himself thinking about it constantly. One afternoon, when their parents were away, Jack turned to Emma with a mischievous smile. Emma, remember that thing we saw on TV? Jack asked, his voice quiet and excited. Emma's face tensed. She remembered the strange, uncomfortable images. I don't know, Jack. It didn't feel right, she replied, her voice unsure. But Jack, feeling more and more curious, insisted. Come on, Emma, let's try it. It'll be like a fun adventure. Emma's heart raced. She didn't want to, but Jack kept pushing, saying things like, Remember when we sneaked out last time and no one found out? If you don't do this, I'll tell Mom and Dad. Emma felt trapped. She didn't know what to do, so reluctantly she agreed. Okay, Jack, she whispered. They went to the bedroom and tried to copy what they had seen on TV. But as soon as it happened, Emma felt pain she didn't expect. She screamed and ran to the living room, clutching her chest, tears streaming down her face. Jack, I never want to do that again. It hurts so much, she cried, feeling scared and confused. Jack didn't understand why Emma was so upset. He still thought it was just part of a game. But Emma felt deep inside that something was terribly wrong. This wasn't like their usual fun games. This was painful and scary. As the days went by, Emma noticed that Jack was changing. He was more insistent, more stubborn, and she didn't recognize him as the brother she once knew. She felt more and more alone in her confusion. One day, Mrs. Thompson came home briefly to pick up some things. Emma saw her chance and tried to speak up. Mom, can I talk to you? She asked, her voice shaking. Mrs. Thompson, distracted by her phone and rushing around, barely looked up. Not now, Emma. I'm busy, she said, without giving her daughter a second thought. Emma stood there for a moment, her heart sinking. She wanted to tell her mom about everything that had happened, but it felt like no one was listening. Emma retreated to her room, feeling invisible. The next day, after Jack asked Emma to do the same thing again, Emma couldn't take it anymore. She ran out of the house, not knowing where to go. She ended up standing at the door of their neighbor, Aunt Grace. Aunt Grace knelt down to meet Emma at eye level, concerned by the look on her face. What's wrong, Emma? She asked gently. Emma burst into tears and told Aunt Grace everything, how Jack had kept asking her to copy what they had seen on TV, how scared and confused she was, and how she felt trapped. Aunt Grace wrapped Emma in a comforting hug. You did the right thing by telling me, she said. You don't have to carry this alone. I'm here for you. With Aunt Grace's help, Emma felt a little better. She was safe now. Aunt Grace promised to help her, and Emma finally felt a sense of relief. When Mr. and Mrs. Thompson found out what had happened, they were shocked. Mr. Thompson didn't believe it at first. Jack wouldn't do something like that, he said. Mrs. Thompson tried to downplay the situation, but Aunt Grace stood firm. Children see things on TV, and if they're not guided, they try to make sense of it in their own way, Aunt Grace explained. You've been so focused on work that you didn't see what your children were watching. This is a warning. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson were silent. They realized that their neglect had allowed their children to be exposed to things they didn't understand. The Thompsons knew they had to change. They began to monitor what Jack and Emma watched on TV and made sure it was age-appropriate. They also encouraged their children to talk about their feelings and thoughts. Jack and Emma started seeing a counselor to help them understand what had happened and heal from the experience. Slowly, their home changed. Mrs. Thompson reduced her work hours, and Mr. Thompson started spending more time with his children on weekends. They all played games together, read stories, and enjoyed being a family again. Jack and Emma began to laugh again, rediscovering the bond they once shared. The painful silence was replaced by love, laughter, and the warmth of a family who had learned the importance of being there for each other. One evening, as they played a game together, Emma turned to her parents with a small smile. "Thank you for listening to me," she said, her voice soft but full of meaning. Her words brought tears to her mother's eyes, and the family knew that they had made a fresh start. The Thompsons understood that the greatest gift they could give each other was their time, attention, and love. And with that, they promised to always be there for one another. This is the end of our story. It teaches us that the most important thing we can do for our children is to listen and love them. They should always feel heard and understood. Change begins when we listen to their voices. So if you find my video interesting, kindly give me a follow and peace.